They just released the trailer for the new Gladiator movie titled Gladiator 2. There was one, and now there's two. Who would have thought? And the movie comes out in November, 20 odd years after the original. So the sequel is coming out after all of these years and is being made by the same director. You'd think that there would be some hype behind it. But I don't think anyone actually cares because Ridley Scott has run out of ideas and is now just rehashing what he did 20 years ago. Or is it the fact that everyone recognises that the first movie worked perfectly fine on its own, and it's not a movie that ever really needed a sequel? I've never heard of anyone saying that they actually wanted this. In fact, I've heard the complete opposite. You had a movie that was a huge epic. There was also a standalone film, which is basically unheard of in modern times, or really ever, and now you want to tarnish that legacy and make the same mistakes they've all made. And so, when I heard about this being made, I put the thing completely out of mind because I hoped that people would come to their senses and it would just get scrapped like the last time, but no. Some more great ideas from Ridley Scott, the guy that brought you the Macintosh ad from the 80s. That's the biggest achievement he ever had. He never made anything better than that. It was so good, I actually thought about buying a Macintosh in 2024. They're going for $5,000 on eBay at the moment. It's practically a steal. Fun fact, by the way, does anyone know that they actually hired real neo-Nazis for that ad? I'm sure that's a good look for Apple, especially these days. I guess that would explain why there's a Jay-Z song playing in the trailer, because Ridley Scott thinks if you have a black guy like Denzel Washington in a movie, you have to play rap music. Specifically Jay-Z. He did it in the trailer for American Gangster as well, which was also a period piece. It didn't belong in that movie either, but he still used it for the trailer. But before we can even get to the trailer, what's one thing that Ridley Scott can't do, but has decided to do again? Well, that's make a sequel. He couldn't make a follow-up to Prometheus, and Prometheus was a prequel, so I guess he can only make standalone movies, and even then he's hit or miss. If you don't believe that he can't make a sequel, besides Alien Covenant being the evidence of that, you only have to look at the original pitch for this movie. Basically, the original idea was Gladiator versus Jesus, where the gods sent Maximus back to Earth to kill Jesus. He considered making that movie. I mean, of course, it does sound better than Alien Covenant, and if he'd actually succeeded in killing Jesus, that would probably be the best movie of all time. I could probably play that and Passion of the Christ back to back all day. In case you can't grasp why this movie is a dumb idea, even though it should be pretty obvious, well, it's because everything was wrapped up in the first film, so there's nothing here to continue on from, or at least there's no reason to, so this was really unnecessary. Who are we supposed to follow from the original? If that kid was Maximus's son and he wanted to avenge his father, that would make sense. But he avenged himself in the first film. See, I'm trying to brainstorm ideas of how this could have worked, but the thing is, you wrapped up everything in the first film, so there's nothing here to carry on from. So there's nothing here to latch onto and excite me to watch this. Denzel Washington and Pedro Pascal are good, but are their performances really going to save this movie? Because Ridley Scott is not a selling point anymore. If you wanted to make another movie from that time period, you could have just done that. You didn't have to call it Gladiator. Why use that movie's name to sell this movie? That sounds like cash grabby shit just to make some money. And what's the point of watching movies these days when every trailer is basically a synopsis of the movie? You know everything that's gonna happen. I doubt there's gonna be any surprises now because the trailer follows in the tradition of showing everything, and the stuff in the movie that we've seen doesn't look that impressive either. The whole rhino fight just seems out of place and goofy. Gladiators did fight animals, sure, but this just looks dumb. They also used to fill the Colosseum with water to have mock ship battles, so that's accurate too, and maybe that'll be interesting because I've never seen that in a movie before. But now you've gone and shown us all of these things, so what can you do now with these gladiatorial fights that's original? There's nothing new now to surprise us. We now know most of the plot from just watching this as well, and from what you can gather from seeing this is that it doesn't have the same feel as the original, while also borrowing the whole concept of a high-up Roman figure who's a slave that has to fight as a gladiator to kill another high-up figure. In this case, it's a general, not an emperor. But it's the same thing. A sequel shouldn't be the same as the original, but worse. The only real props you can give this movie is that it looks visually good, which is going to trick a lot of stupid people into thinking that it is actually good, but being visually good should be the bare minimum for someone like Ridley Scott. Admittedly, it looks better than most sequels do these days, but that's not saying much. And I like epics, and it's good that they aren't all Marvel movies now. But just because we're getting more epics doesn't mean that they're actually good. So a movie that I hoped Ridley Scott or anyone else would never make is almost here. And not only does it look disappointing, but I think it might finally destroy that little bit of reputation that he still has, which he probably deserves. If you're gonna make pointless sequels and reboots of movies that were fine as they were, then this is the treatment that you should get.